When I was a kid, growing up in Pasadena, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, in the 1970s, every summer especially, something would happen. I lived up against the mountains, and there would be a magic trick. The smog would come and the mountains would disappear from a half-mile away. Gigantic 5,000-foot mountains, they're called the San Gabriel mountain range. They would go away. You couldn't stay outside to play baseball for 2 hours because your lungs ached.
I seize the moment, I seize the day. I'm in the right now, in the present I'm gonna stay. Hello sunshine, I watch the sunrise. Yoga in the morning, it's good to exercise.
I climb to the top of the tree, to have an open mind, that is the key. I'm giving the best of me, I fly away, my heart is free. I climb to the top of the tree, to have an open mind, that is the key. I'm giving the best of me, I fly away, my heart is free.
It was terrifying when smog hit Los Angeles in the mid-1940s during World War II. And people actually thought it was the Japanese shelling us from a submarine with a chemical munition. Actually, it wasn't even that hard to go find the action and politicians panicking behind closed doors and saying, what are we going to do? How do we keep the public from becoming hysterical? Because it was hitting every day, and it was spreading from not just industrial areas, it was spreading like up to where we are in Pasadena, up to suburbs.
With the sunshine of Los Angeles making its atmosphere the most ozone-laden in the world.
People wanted easy answers, and they wanted just to, it was almost like if they saw smoke or vapors coming out of a plant or a factory, they would blame that. And there was almost people like going down there with pitchforks, or they would see, there was this idea that it was, that we had a lot of sulfur in our air. And sulfur is known to make women's hosiery rip. And so when some men saw the hosiery on women's legs tearing, they go, see, that's our problem, sulfur. It actually took a scientist from the Netherlands who was working at Caltech, California Institute of Technology. It's a very famous technical school. He was the one that said, no, everything you thought is wrong. And he actually invented photochemical atmospheric science in his little lab because nobody else seemed to be applying the scientific method. Dr. Ari Haagen-Smit, he was this little guy who came to the United States. First he went to, I think he went to Harvard, and he was worried about his family back in Europe because the war and the Nazis taking over his country, and he never wanted to be in this field. He wanted to be in biochemistry, but he made all the difference. A little guy from Europe saved Los Angeles.
Los Angeles suffers the worst blanket of smog in its history.
It was a very slow-burning revolution because once just because he proved it to himself didn't mean he convinced political powers from LA City Hall to the oil industry, which had a very firm toehold on the LA economy, and the car makers. He not only did he have to convince that group of people, he had to convince consumers that in post-World War II had more money, could afford to buy cars, loved the California lifestyle of living very flat suburban, in a suburban way where if you had to drive 10 miles to work, that wasn't a problem. It wasn't like New York where you were living in some packed apartment building. So he had to tell people the foundations of our lifestyle here were dangerous to human health. And it took him a long time, maybe 7 or 8 years, to really get people to go, you know what, he's right. We have to go along with it. We can't just lie about it and delude ourselves.
Actually, the 1970s is when I started to think about this. I was a student in this town in Southern California in 1972. I arrived. I arrived by air. Actually, I drove here, but would also. I grew up in the United States East Coast, so whenever I flew in here, the plane landing at Ontario Airport, like 20 minutes away from here, you would go through a quarter-mile thick of fog, but it wasn't fog; it was brown. And you would go from brilliant blue as the plane descended through this incredibly thick brown smear of smog. And then you would land and you'd look up and all you saw was yellow. The air stank. It was awful. We used to call it, my friends and I in college called it the smell of the ick. And there were days that it was so bad that I wouldn't leave the house. I would not go to class because it was a mile away. I was not walking a mile. And your stomach kind of churned. I mean, it was just so horrible. Today, much better. I ride my bike, I walk. I'm in the same town, back again.
Pollution was dangerous. And although Los Angeles was a prime example of it, it was happening in every city in the United States and around the world.
Let's say we assume there's a problem with smog. Who's lining up to say it's a problem? So there's two sets of groups that really emerge. The first of which is a series of, let's call them maverick scientists. And they're maverick for a reason, because most of their peers don't accept it. Point number one. Who's feeling this most of all, and who feels like they have political power to do something about it, which is not the same thing, were a group of white women in the middle classes who lived in the San Fernando Valley, which is one of the places where smog is impacted most because there's a lot of cars there. It's a new suburban landscape. And they realized that when they're sending their kids to school, the kids are coughing, they're not active, they don't look healthy. And so they start to wonder, is there something about the air that's affecting my child? In the 1950s, many of these same women belonged to organizations like the Junior League, which is a women's group in the United States for women of some wealth and standing, or they belong to other women's organizations. They start collaborating as groups. So it's not these individuals. They now have organizations, neighborhood associations in the schools. There's an organization around the United States called parent-teacher associations. So now teachers are collaborating with parents, both of whom are worried about their students. And that's a power unit. That actually can begin to have some pop in American politics, but only if somebody's listening. First to identify the problem, and then to create a problem around the problem that makes politicians unhappy. They don't like problems. So they would wish it away until the voters said, no, we're not leaving. But it took a while, but in truth, it's been highly successful. It's been an extraordinary transition, and that was just at the moment in which the political figures in Los Angeles are beginning to accept that smog is not only a problem in an atmospheric sense, it was a political issue that they had to address. And so when we returned to Southern California 35 years later, we came back to a very different place, where it's still, the smog is bad, absolutely, but it's way cleaner, way cleaner. And the difference is that the standard has got harder and harder and harder to reach, which is a good thing, right? It's forcing us to be better at what we do. But most of the time, my students do not understand it when I say to them, back in the day, when I was your age, we didn't see these things. We didn't see blue sky, we saw yellow sky. And we wouldn't walk across campus to go to class because it was just too painful.
I see kids missing school every day. In the U.S., we had 14 million school days missed last year from kids with asthma who can't breathe, who just want to go to school and live their lives, but because of air pollution, they're getting sick. People are getting cancer and dying. I mean, this is not... Look, energy and climate sounds like this thing up in the clouds, and it's sort of far off California environmental thinking. But in fact, it's about public health and people's lives. but it's also about money. The fact is that the fossil fuel economy, relying on a petroleum state or a coal-driven state, it may look good in the short term, but in the long term, that money dries up. And what are you left with? You're left with healthcare costs, long commutes, and you haven't made change. So we passed SB 100 last year, which would put California on track for a 100% clean energy future. And that doesn't mean only solar and wind, by the way. The remaining 40% of the portfolio is sort of low carbon, zero carbon energy writ large. And so that means we can look at carbon capture opportunities, we can look at other sort of low carbon solutions to get there. That's just the electricity sector. Our great sins are also in the petroleum sector in driving.
President Trump confirmed on Twitter that his administration is revoking California's federal waiver on emissions. Now, the state had previously been allowed to set stricter emission standards for vehicles than the federal government has, but now that is in jeopardy.
The president did not like what the Obama administration did. You have to remember it set these very stringent fuel economy standards when the car makers were in bankruptcy. They are supposed to go into effect from 2020 to 2026. Trump wanted to roll that back. California said, well, you can do that, but we have our waiver. And so we're going to stick to the stricter emission standards because that's important to us.
The president has tweeted climate change skepticism at least 115 times, including a claim that the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese.
So Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
I think Donald Trump is the most environmentally ignorant president we've ever had. Just in general, the most ignorant. It is mind-boggling for him to not only take the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord, as the world has experienced hotter and hotter weather, breaking records one after the other. In California, I think 5 out of the last 6 years have been the hottest ever in recorded history since like the late 1880s when we started taking temperature measures. He's doing it to please a certain proportion of the population, but what he's doing is endangering the entire country and the world.
President Trump doesn't believe in climate change. Actually, we're not sure he doesn't believe in it. He's just going to say he doesn't believe in it. He has pulled the United States out of a number of international agreements that would have enabled us as a nation to contribute to the global problem that we are largely responsible for.
In fact, Donald Trump is, without exaggeration here, folks, one of the most prominent climate change deniers in the world, using his massive platform to draw attention to debunked facts and conspiracy theories aimed at trying to disprove the patently obvious real fact that we are in an ahistorical moment of global warming.
As California recovers from devastating fires that scorched nearly 100,000 acres and forced thousands from their homes, the president lashed out at California Governor Gavin Newsom and threatened to pull federal funding.
When my district burned down in the Woolsey fire, I lost my home, and he walked down the street I grew up in with Governor Brown and walked through the ashes. I'm tired of fighting with him. We need federal assistance on these funds, and he may want to pretend like it's not happening, but the ashes are on his boots, and he's seen people thousands of people, who have been hurt or hundreds have lost their lives.
Heavenly Father, please help us. Please help us to be safe. I'm thankful for Jeremy and his willingness to be brave.
The governor doesn't know. He's like a child. He doesn't know what he's doing. Every year, it's always California. It's rarely somebody else or someplace else.
Newsom fired back, "You don't believe in climate change. You are excused from this conversation."
First of all, who cares what he believes? There's an old comment, there's an old statement my mom used to tell me, never listen to a fool or a drunk. Well, he's a fool.
That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about
Tak długo jak Kalifornia próbuje pozbyć się brudnego powietrza, tak długo swoją własną walkę ze smogiem toczy Mary Nichols. To w Stanach Zjednoczonych prawdziwa instytucja, kobieta nazywana królową zieleni. Dzisiaj idę zapytać ją, czy musi walczyć już tylko ze smogiem, czy także z Donaldem Trumpem.
I think Trump is an interesting character. I think he's an appalling president, and I don't support pretty much anything he's done. But he's interesting to watch this phenomenon because he has taken certain stands, which I don't think he even knows what he means when he says these things sometimes, but he feels that they're popular with his base, and that base of people who are the ones who think that the government is always lying to them, who believe that everything is a vast conspiracy by liberal elites to take over and, you know, ruin the American way of life. I mean, there's a whole narrative, and even though Trump himself is a billionaire and in no way a victim of any of those ideas, he's really managed to mobilize those people and speak to them, and they seem to resonate with what he's saying.
I don't know how their minds work. I don't even know if their minds do work.
Maybe it's a strategy.
Maybe it is a strategy. I think if you were to really sit him down and say your life depends on you getting this answer correct, he would admit there is climate change. Our environment is gotten greatly better, but it could still improve. I think he would agree to that. I think he's playing politics, you know, with a loaded gun.
Ja nie wiem, na ile w rzeczywistości człowiek przyczynia się do zmian klimatycznych. Głosy naukowców są bardzo różne. Wiemy doskonale o tym, że mamy do czynienia też ze skrajnościami, ale patrząc obiektywnie, historycznie, według takiej wiedzy, która jest pewna, tak? Zmiany klimatu były w historii świata. Były bardzo różne te klimaty, od epok lodowcowych aż także po epoki, kiedy mieliśmy tutaj na naszych ziemiach klimat tropikalny. Było różnie. Jakie były tego przyczyny? Naturalne, bo nie było człowieka wtedy na świecie.
That having been said, I am also convinced that the people of Poland and the United States largely understand the threats because they're embodied, literally embodied in ourselves, our lungs, our capacity to live healthfully, to drink clean water, to breathe clean air. These are real focused tensions. And if we focus on them as a critique of the others, of Trump and other leaders who don't agree, it makes it harder for them to make their case.
California had any direct contact with Poland was around the Conference of Parties in 2018, and one of the most interesting things about that for me was that, you know, I knew that in the past Poland had had heavy dependence on coal burning, and you know, that its industries had been very heavy, steel and things like that. I didn't really know the extent to which now in the cities people still burn in their own homes a fuel which is very polluting, and the levels of air pollution that people experience at a day-to-day level are much worse than I had realized.
I think there's a tremendous amount of intellectual capital to be unleashed in Poland, but you have to have an imagination about it. You can't just keep doing things how you're doing, because you're going to choke the children and all the people in that country, and eventually time's going to run out on us here. The clock is ticking, and we can put our heads in the sand and pretend like it's not happening, but the truth is there.
I didn't have any meetings with the Polish government. Certainly at the COP itself, they were showing a lot of coal-based products that are manufactured. There was a soap and jewelry and things which are kind of a little bit of a joke, I think, about the coal that exists in Poland. But I didn't really get much of a sense about whether the country is serious or not. We did meet with an advocacy group. The man who came and spoke to us about his work seemed optimistic and pretty upbeat, but not certainly feeling confident that there was going to be any major change happening quickly.
Polska gospodarka jest oparta na węglu. Trzeba tą gospodarkę modernizować, trzeba tą gospodarkę unowocześniać, ale nie zamykać źródła surowców, a tym źródłem surowców jest kopalnia, która wydobywa węgiel.
We want to work with partners in Poland and all over the world, frankly, to meet the Paris Accords and to still try to push for change, but it's hard. You know, to be a young public official, I'm the youngest senator in California, sometimes people don't want to hear that. But I would say, you know, now is the time to be brave.
Global warming is a fact, and it's much worse than people think it is, and because it's something that physically has to happen. It makes no physical sense for it not to be occurring with all the emissions that are going into the atmosphere. Most people, even if they don't believe in global warming, do believe in clean and renewable energy for different reasons. And if they can believe in the solution without believing in the problem, I'm fine with that.
Zgodnie z planem w 2045 roku Kalifornia będzie korzystać już niemal wyłącznie z odnawialnych źródeł energii. Profesor Mark Jacobson zaprosił mnie do swojego biura na słynnym Uniwersytecie w Stanfordzie, żeby udowodnić, że w Polsce powinniśmy zrobić dokładnie to samo. I to ledwie 5 lat po Amerykanach.
We developed roadmaps for 139 countries of the world. And this is to transform every country to 100% clean renewable energy for all energy sectors. That's electricity, transportation, heating, cooling, industry, agriculture, forestry, fishing, and military too. That everything would be run with renewable energy. And so we developed a plan for Poland, and the plan calls for 80% transition by 2030 and 100% no later than 2050, hopefully before then. So obviously we don't know what will happen. It's my hope that we will transition, all countries, including Poland, but we think it's technically and economically possible. Whether it happens or not, we think is a social and political decision. And it really depends on if people want it to happen. Each country it will be a different mix of energy. It's technically and economically possible. Poland has a lot of wind resource and has some solar resource too. And it turns out that when you transition to clean renewable energy, if you electrify everything, you actually reduce your power demand by up to 58%. So you need less power. You need less than half the power. The reason is well, first of all, the wind and solar are coming right to your panel, so you don't need to mine, transport, or refine fossil fuels or uranium. And 13% of all energy worldwide is used for just that purpose. So you eliminate 13% of your energy demand right there. Reliable, clean, and renewable energy, this is something that people want now because they know the benefits. I mean, I transitioned my own house. I built a new house 2 years ago, and it has no gas, has solar on the roof, has batteries, uses heat pumps for heating, has an induction cooktop stove, and it's perfect. It works perfectly well. I have an electric car, so I had no gasoline bill for cars, no natural gas bill for heating, no electric bill at all. In fact, I produced 20% more electricity than I used in my first year, and I was paid $500 by the utility for the extra electricity. So no gas bill, no electric bill, no gasoline bill, and they paid me. So how can you lose? I like to show other people that it's possible. And I believe it is possible. It is possible on a large scale. We can all do it. I should say that this campus, which we're sitting at, Stanford University, is 100% renewable campus for not only electricity, but all the heating as well and cooling. And that's because, and there was a gas plant right outside my office, right behind you. There was a natural gas plant that was removed, bulldozed, about 4 years ago, and replaced with a district heating system and solar from the desert, because the university purchased solar plants that they put in the desert, and they use that electricity, or they trade that electricity to effectively be 100% renewable energy. You know, I know there are challenges that every country faces, and there are some countries that will be hard to transition, especially those that are in conflict and war. But I know it's possible, and so I have hope, and I feel very positive that it can and will be done.
What's crazy about smog in Europe, in Poland, other places, we've known about air pollution for 700-800 years. You know that? William Shakespeare wrote about it. It's been in oil paintings going way back, you know, and so it does tell you something about our priorities, that this thing is still lingering around, you know. But I would love to see the Polish people, you know, get the best minds, collaborate, try to think about how, you know, what renewable energy you guys can mine. Parts of Europe haven't been able to stand up to Russia enough because they're so dependent on natural gas and that pipeline. It's kind of like a gun to their heads, right? What's your choice? You know, tell Vladimir Putin no and freeze to death?
We were listening earlier today to Henry Stern speak, and he said, you know, it's this incumbent, you have to get over the hump and get people on board. And so it's already economic. It's already, if you look at the numbers, and China's realizing this, all the nations are realizing, you know, and starting to invest. And it starts with a small portfolio of test projects generally in the country, and the numbers will speak for themselves. I mean, if they don't, why would you pay more for energy, dirty energy, when cheaper clean energy is available? Having a roadmap is a huge, important thing, and I think if you have a roadmap to clean energy, businesses will follow, the investments will follow, and you know, Poland will be in with cleaner air and cheaper bills.
I work for Grid Alternatives here in Los Angeles, and we help the cities of Los Angeles transition to renewable energy by helping people who couldn't afford renewable energy become included in the transition. Today is a big day for the city of Los Angeles because Mayor Garcetti has announced that we're going to be moving away from gas power in the future. We believe that a transition to solar power, wind power, and other renewable forms of energy is only fully effective if low-income people and people in polluted communities can be included in that solar. This solar power is helping them save money so that they have more dollars back in their pocket to put food on the table, to pay for health care, to go on a trip. The money that they save because of solar can be a very powerful force to improve their lives.
None of my neighbors of this area I know have them, but I am aware of other people, customers that have solar, and they are very satisfied with it. So they say the utility bills came down dramatically, so now I want to bring my bills down. So.
Ant Energy was founded in 2007 by a group of engineers out of Arizona State University, and ASU is one of the largest universities here in the United States. And this group of engineers had the goal of they wanted to come up with a better battery than the lithium-ion battery, which was invented about 30 years ago. They wanted to find something that was longer duration, because the thing with a lithium-ion battery is it goes in spurts, right? So it's really good for providing energy for short periods of time, but they needed something that could provide longer duration energy. Most people are familiar with the zinc air because it's the type of battery that's used in a hearing aid. But the problem with that is it's really small, can't store a lot, and it's also not rechargeable. So they were keen to find a solution, a zinc air-based battery that was rechargeable and that could scale. And that was really the impetus for creating Ant Energy.
The California Hugginsmith Laboratory is the world's first dedicated motor vehicle emissions test facility. This facility was instrumental in California being able to reduce the emissions of motor vehicles and significantly tackle our ongoing smog problems. What we're doing here is this is like a large dynamometer for motor vehicles. It's like a treadmill in which the vehicle can operate as it does on the highway, and we can actually measure all the emissions that are created by this vehicle and measure those per mile of operation. What this allows us to do is determine what engineering changes are effective in reducing smog-forming pollutants to vehicles in California. The vehicle that we're testing here is one that we've borrowed from citizens in California. We go out and test a few thousand vehicles per year that we have actually gotten from owners that are in use. The point of doing this is to test vehicles that are actually in their life cycles and to make sure that we're reducing emissions as designed. Because it's important that we not only have clean cars when they're new, but over the entire lifetime of the vehicle. The greatest thing that individuals can do to impact change is to really look at all the actions that they take that contribute to smog forming and climate emissions. Reducing burning of fossil fuels or reducing burning of wood, driving less, looking for cleaner equipment and cleaner vehicles whenever possible. All these choices add up. It may seem like a small contribution for individuals, but when you multiply that by millions of individuals, not only in your country but across the world, it really makes a big difference.
The Air Resources Board estimates that roughly 7,000 people lives could be saved if we achieved our clean air standards for particle pollution. And so that's a significant number, thousands of people a year due to premature deaths, tens of billions of dollars in healthcare costs, children missing school because of asthma. There's a tremendous amount of cost involved in air pollution. It's a real concern when political leaders decide not to follow the science, decide to go their own way, and maybe listen more to industry than to professionals about public health issues. I think that's really where the concern is, and that's where motivated people who can really tell their story, who can say, we want healthier communities, we want clean air, we want clean water, and we don't want our hard-fought victories on clean air and clean water taken away.
People realize that when they are running in the city, it's like they smoke 4 packets of cigarettes.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah, and that very analogy of thinking about air pollution and the metric is how many packs of cigarettes are you smoking, that if you smoke 4 packs of cigarettes, that's what the air in Los Angeles tasted like, let alone what your lungs looked like, is manifest in these women in the 1950s who all wore white gloves. Because that was what women did of a certain class. Well, those white gloves got dirty from the air. So they start putting scarves around their mouths and they realize, why am I doing this? They did it to protect themselves, but it also was a signal to themselves, like maybe this is not good air to breathe. You need those moments when people go, it's like I'm smoking. I don't smoke, but I feel terrible. To make it personal, and once it's made personal, or you're a parent and you're worried about your child, then it's grassroots politics at its finest, and that's when you can start to mobilize, and that's when you can begin to change the politics of a place, like in Poland.
I think if we had more women in charge and mothers in office, we would see the environment change because they're very future thinking for their children.
I can stand up as an environmental activist and say, this is terrible. That doesn't persuade anybody. This is terrible because your life is going to be shorter. You're going to be racked with certain kinds of problems. We know asthma is an issue. We know obesity is an issue. We know these things matter. So let's tie that to things that are on our tables, on our plates, that we have in our refrigerators. That's the thing that's really going to carry the day.
Kalifornia toczy wojnę, której właściwie nie jest w stanie wygrać. Od lat jest pionierem walki ze smogiem, a równocześnie to mieszkańcy Kalifornii ciągle oddychają najgorszym powietrzem w całych Stanach Zjednoczonych. Ale jedno jest pewne, jeśli Kalifornii uda się wygrać ze smogiem, jeśli stąd zniknie zanieczyszczone powietrze, to okaże się, że absolutnie wszystko jest możliwe. Nawet świat bez smogu.
I seize the moment, I seize the day. I'm in the right now, in the present, I'm gonna stay. Hello sunshine, I watch the sunrise. Yoga in the morning, it's good to exercise.
I climb to the top of the tree, to have an open mind, that is the